Hello.
Morning.
Morning.
How are you all? Welcome to our live emotional eating. Are you an emotional eater?
Yes, I think we're all emotional eaters, aren't
Yeah,
we?
guilty.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So we were having a conversation post our ultra processed foods conversation last week, and we just got onto the topic of when do we eat processed foods and why, and then it all, kind of unraveled into emotional eating, which I know that I'm going to say most people struggle with this day and age. I don't know if I know anyone that doesn't.
And emotional eating, what makes emotional eating different from eating when you're hungry? I guess it's the fact that you're not hungry, you're bored or emotional.
You said to me once, when you sit down in front of the TV in the evening, would you get back up and go to the shop to get some broccoli?
No, nobody would.
But I would get up and go out and get a takeaway or some chocolate or something.
Yeah.
For me, that represents emotional eating.
Yeah, and I think it's combining pleasures. So if you're sitting watching a movie or watching TV, that is pleasurable. It releases dopamine. And then if you're eating as well, like you're stacking the pleasure. But also stacking the pleasure. But also when you're not paying attention to what you're eating because you're looking at a screen, you have the tendency to overeat. So
every night.
But yeah, and then you get into the ultra processed food. Like we say, you're not going to go and buy some broccoli or a salad. It's always going to be something in a packet. Because if you're eating in front of the TV, it needs to be something that you can easily...
More convenient.
Yeah.
Don't have to prepare.
Yes. So it comes in a packet. It's easy to snack on. I mean, snack foods are made to be hyperpalatable and addictive. I mean, we talked a little bit about that bliss point, didn't we, last time? But eating in the evening, generally we'd have eaten our dinner. We're not really hungry. Is it boredom?
My body tells me that I'm hungry, but I think it's just a craving rather than a hunger.
Well, you know that you're not really hungry if eating some broccoli isn't appetizing.
Yeah, and also I don't think we know what hungry is in this country.
No.
None of us have really, truly experienced hunger.
No, I mean, when I've done those really long, extended fasts, then you know what hunger is. Because I do a regular sort of 7-day fast, normally twice a year. And yeah.
Oof, no thanks.
Yeah, that really does teach you how,
what hunger is.
But also what's really enlightening about doing those longer term fasting, and I wouldn't recommend that you do them first off, is how much time we spend buying food, thinking about food, preparing food. When you're not doing any of that, you have so much more time to do other things.
You know what's funny? If you go on holiday, let's say to an all-inclusive resort or something, you kind of spend time between meals. You just kill time between meals. That's what I found. If they're not my kind of holidays, but I have been on a few in my time. And that's what I end up doing. I just kill time between meals. Everything for me about a holiday is food-based.
I think when my nan, bless her, was always overweight. I can always remember that she was permanently on a diet. She did all of these different diets. But if you phoned her up, she would tell you about her day around what she'd eaten.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I guess the point of me referencing the holiday thing is that it's a cultural thing to relax with food, to reward with food, to it's such a big thing. It's everything. I think culturally, everything revolves around food.
Yeah, I mean, I went out yesterday, bank holiday, and decided to go shopping in Southampton. I think the whole world did, to be honest. It was really busy. And I went to one of those sort of fast food restaurant type things. And what really surprised me, don't think I'd ever noticed it really before, was how fast the fast food was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you went in, you queued up, then you had to sit down and they would shout out your number. So you'd wait for your food. And I was observing like other people waiting around in the queue, waiting for their food.
Are they waiting with anxiety out of interest?
Yes. Yes.
I've noticed that as well.
Like the families.
Like it's not quick enough.
No, it wasn't quick enough. And then you'd see sort of people, couples, families, young, you know, groups of young sort of teenagers, and then they'd grab their food, sit down. I mean, it's not like a plague of locusts, but it is. And then they'd eat their food really, really quickly and then get up, put their rubbish in the bin or not, and then leave. And I remember saying to my son how food, when you went to a restaurant, I mean, God, we're showing our age. I'm showing my age now. But if I went out with my family, it was such a rare thing to go to a restaurant that it was a big thing, that people sort of sat down. It was a whole experience. You'd have a waiter come up, you know, there would be an experience to it, but this wasn't like that at all. It was in, out, as quickly as possible.
You know what's interesting? And like when we go to Greece, you know, most meals when you eat out are like that. And you know, they'll take like an hour to bring you the bill after you've finished eating, and they, you know, take their time. And actually, just from a cultural perspective, I really struggle with that because I'm like, well, I'll hurry up, I'm done. I want on to the next thing. Where's my bill? But it's very culturally the norm to, you know, if they have a coffee out, they're going to have a coffee for 2 hours and drink that one coffee for 2 hours. And me, I'm like, gulp and go. That's interesting.
Because we live in that sort of fast-paced society, don't we? Of like, but what are we getting up to go and do? You know, I mean, it's better to sit there from a digestive point of view, to sit and digest your food and actually chew your food. You know, digestion starts in the mouth. And so chewing your food efficiently can really, really help with digestive issues. But I would say that most people that I observed yesterday in this fast food restaurant, which is not somewhere I would normally go to, didn't look like they chewed their food. It was more like an addiction.
Right, and this is where I was going to come back to this emotional eating point, which is why I mentioned an anxiety earlier. What's the emotion around this food?
I'm hungry, I must eat, and I must eat quickly.
So it's a fulfillment thing.
Yeah.
So it's not about having an experience, it's about it being as quick as possible.
Yeah.
So that you can move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a contradiction there, I suppose, isn't there? Because, you know, I don't know. I'm thinking out loud and it's not making sense.
Is it that they're hungry, or is it perhaps that they have their blood sugar has crashed, you know, so they need to top up on the drug that is sugar? Because as we know, you know, sugar is in even, you know, the bun in a hamburger, you know, like, is it that they're actually really hungry, or is it perhaps that they're withdrawing from their drug of choice?
Is it habitual? Is it, you know, it's lunchtime, I should eat?
I think there is that.
And it's an experience, because not the kind of experience where you sit down and eat for a long time, but it's an experience in the sense of, well, I'm out shopping, I should treat myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely comes with that. Because, I mean, I wouldn't ever go to a place like that. The only reason I did is my son wanted to go there, and, you know, it was convenient, and it was so busy that actually it was probably one of the the quickest places to go.
Yeah. And you paid the price today because you've
Oh,
come
I
up with a
did.
rash, haven't you?
Yeah, I've come up with a rash, which is why I've got this around my neck. But yeah, I've come up in spots all on my neck, and I just thought, wow, that, whether it's the vegetable oil, perhaps it's the gluten. You mentioned that there is gluten in this particular. Shall I tell them where we went?
And do.
I went to Five Guys. And I didn't have a bun. I just had like the burger, that plastic cheese, which I don't really eat dairy. And I mean, what is it with that plastic American cheese? Oh no, I didn't think it was. It doesn't taste of anything. It's the texture of it I really didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
And some bacon. I had that. And then today come up on this rash.
I mean, that cheese isn't a food.
No.
When I lived in the States, you could buy it in a string can and you would just squirt it out like silly string.
Yeah, I mean, what is in that? I mean, that's not food, is it?
No
but
food
you
in there.
mentioned that those burgers contain gluten.
Yes, the patties do, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's why I've come up in a rash. And it's really noticeable.
The conversation we were having, though, is prior to this was, you know, if we're just looking at Five Guys as an example, and then versus McDonald's as another example. Like, they're both fulfilling the fast food element. I mean, what's the real difference? One is more expensive, but I think marketing is the difference. Five Guys is seen as a bit more upper class, a bit more fancy than a McDonald's is, but you're really just getting the same thing.
Yeah.
So again, what is this emotional pull towards one or the other, or doing it at all? I think there's a status thing. There's like a status pull.
Of where you choose to eat.
Where you choose to eat.
Yeah.
Because effectively you're getting the same thing.
Yeah, and I mean, in McDonald's you don't get shouted at for your number and you don't have to cheer. I mean, I found it quite aggressive, actually, you know, like, because people were sort of queuing and waiting for their number to be called, like they were starving hungry and that they really needed.
And then this anxiety while they wait for 5 minutes for food. That's the thing that gets me, and I see it whenever I go to a fast food place. Everyone's standing around waiting, but there's an impatience in the waiting, like an anxiety where, you know, actually you wouldn't. It's even if it takes 15 minutes, it's still pretty fast. You couldn't cook that yourself in 15 minutes at home. You know, so culturally, I just think that there's a lot going on when it comes to the way that we eat things like this. And I think that some of that is about status, where we choose to eat, even if it is fast food. Some of that is about this kind of habitual need to eat. Some of it is that addiction pull, like that remembering that taste and salivating, and which you don't get for broccoli. You know, there's a lot going on, and I think that the companies that market these things, a bit like you talk about that bliss point, they know how to suck you in.
Yeah, and I mean, they do it with the colours that they choose as well. You know, most fast food restaurants or snack foods are going to have like real bright primary colours, and our brains are attracted to that. You know, but most comfort food or emotional eating, I mean, personally, I would go more for sweet, but I know people do comfort eat with savoury.
I'm a more sweet person too. We had a conversation about this as well. So there's a theory that you'd learnt around if you tend to kind of comfort eat on sweet or savoury. So tell us about that.
Yeah, and the texture of the food. So if you think of chocolate melts, doesn't it? It's a whole experience in the mouth of sweetness and that sort of melting. Sweet, but especially chocolate, if that's your sort of go-to emotional food, is supposed to be emotionally lack of love or lack of connection. Whereas if you're snacking on crunchy foods like crisps, that's angry eating. And when I first heard this, I thought, wow, that's really interesting, because you could see how crunchy crisps or crackers would be more anger. angry eating. And that really surprised me, because I thought I'd never thought about eating because I'm angry until I blogged about this. When I was doing a 7-day fast, this was a few years ago, I was on about day 3 or 4, and I had a phone call from my sister's partner at the time. And we were debating, it was around the Black Lives Matter thing, and we were debating that whole thing. And let's just say we had quite polar views about it. Well, when I came off the phone, I found myself really wanting to eat. It was a real trigger. And obviously I noticed it because I couldn't eat. I was in the middle of a 7-day fast. So I had to really deal with the emotions that came up rather than suppress those emotions, that anger, with food.
I totally get that, because, you know, if I've had a bad day, I'm going to reward myself with crappy food. But also, if I've had a really good day, I'm going to reward myself
with food.
With crappy food.
And I mean, food is a pleasure, isn't it? You know, when we're born and we're given our first food, like our mother's breast, for example, that's going to be a comfort. It's warm, you know. So eating has to be pleasurable, because otherwise, as humans, we wouldn't want to do it again.
I used to date someone, and he ate for function. He just ate the bare minimum. He wasn't interested in food at all. Just ate to stay alive.
And I think that there are people like that. There are people that live to eat, and then there are people on the other end. And most of us are in that sort of spectrum. But I remember watching, because I did a addictive eating module, and I think one of the lecturers talked about how he felt that, isn't it sad that people only have that joy of eating food in their lives? That perhaps we should have more going on than just food to make us happy. And I can remember thinking, yeah, that probably is right. But recently I had a lady come to see me. It was her first consultation. And I mean, she is overweight without a doubt. She has issues, chronic health issues that would be improved by losing weight. And when I said to her this, she got really upset, and she said, oh, another person telling me about her weight. And she didn't link her ill health with her weight. And then she said to me, it's the only thing that gives her pleasure. If you take away her sugar, like she has 4 sugars in her coffee.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. You know, so
but it's probably not as much as what's in a full fat Coke or whatever.
No.
Yeah.
But if you're having 4 of those a day, that's a lot of sugar. I mean, that's 80 grams of sugar a day. That's over 2 ounces of sugar that you're drinking, you know. But I really empathised with her, because of her ill health, she can't get out. She can't socialise. She can't walk very far because of pain and other health issues. So it is really difficult. And of course, she's using her food, or particularly her coffee, with the sugar. That makes her feel better in the short term. But of course, long term, it's slowly poisoning her.
It's a vicious cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
You know, you don't feel good about yourself for whatever reason, and then feed yourself to suppress the feelings, and then don't feel good about having done that either.
And then behind all that, you'll have that roller coaster, the carbohydrate roller coaster, where you eat sugar, you have a sugar high, So you're feeling quite stimulated and then quite good. But then the body releases insulin, which brings the sugar down because the body has to maintain quite a strict balance when it comes to sugar. Like, actually, in your whole bloodstream at any one time, the body can really only handle 5 grams of sugar, which is a teaspoon. So if you eat more than a teaspoon of sugar
a day, or in a serving,
in a serving,
right, okay.
which is not a lot.
No,
not
when we look at those cereals from last week.
No, I mean, or surprisingly, one slice of bread, whether it be brown bread, wholemeal, sourdough, seeded, one slice would have 3 teaspoons of sugar, so about 15 grams. So your body is going to have to release insulin, which will bring the sugar down. So you're constantly on a roller coaster of highs and lows. And that creates craving, because once you're crashing on the sugar, you want more. You want to refuel. So you're constantly on this rise and fall.
That describes my day. I'm such a sugar addict. It's unreal.
I mean, I am a sugar addict, which is why, I mean, I never thought I would give up sugar, ever. And it was purely vanity that did get me to give up sugar. I mean, I've done so much research on diet and low carb diet, and and it wasn't until I was going to it was a big event, and you had to wear like a cocktail dress, and the event was in February, and I bought this dress in the January sales just after Christmas, and it was a size 10, and I had to be crowbarred into this cocktail dress, and I needed to lose weight really, really quickly to get into that dress to go to this award show comfortably. And it was that finally made me give up refined sugar.
In itself, isn't it?
Yeah. So it was complete vanity.
So it wasn't health.
No, it wasn't health. It was vanity.
Well, thanks for your honesty there, because I think, a lot of people aren't vulnerable enough just to admit that they're doing it for that reason. And I think hats off to you, because that's real.
Yeah, and I mean, it was, and I knew how poisonous sugar was. I knew how addictive it was, but I actually wasn't prepared to give it up until, it's a beautiful dress. I've still got the dress. I got into it.
I mean, I always used to make fun. I guess I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but I always used to think all these people that go on these crash diets before their weddings just to get in a dress. And I was like, well, that's not the person that, once you get married and get comfortable, you're not going to look like the same person in that dress. And you don't look like it now. So what's the need?
Photos.
It's the photos.
Photos.
But then when I got married, I was like, oh, I'm going to go on a diet and I'm going to lose weight.
Did you?
I totally did the exact same thing.
You did exactly the same.
Yeah. And I think you know this in me. I used to, promote a weight loss product, which worked really well for me. But, I look back at that and I just think, not healthy. Actually, what would have been healthier would have been to have given up sugar.
Yeah.
What would have been healthier would have been to have really made a conscious effort with my long-term diet.
But I do think that these sort of replacement products, milkshakey type replacement products, they can give you that start.
It was a good reset.
Yeah. And sometimes, if the mountain is so high that anything that can give you that little bit of a gain, or in this case, a loss.
Bit of momentum.
Yeah. I don't think that they're bad. I mean, I would want to encourage people to eat real food. But do you know people don't cook? Yeah,
but I mean, is that realistic? Yeah.
Because honestly, people do not cook their own food.
No, and now I've got children. I really understand that, because, you know, you get in from the school run, the kids are wrecking the house, you're unpacking all their bags and doing their laundry, and then there's a club, and then there's this and there's that, and then before you know it, bedtime's coming up. So you're like, oh, quick, shove a pizza in the oven.
Yeah.
You know, and I get it. Like, that's the truth of life now. And it used to also be that it was common to have a one income household and two parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that's less and less common these days, and you can't afford to do that, and not everybody has two parents. So, you know, if you're like piling in work with that as well, and, you know, commuting and anything else, or the school runs, there is actually not time. And I guess this is kind of looping back. This is where we get to with some of this fast food addiction is, oh, I haven't got time, quick drive through McDonald's.
Yeah.
And we did that ourselves last week with the kids, because we had a meeting after school, and by the time we would have got back, it was almost their bedtime. And so we literally whizzed them through McDonald's and said, done, fed, bed.
I mean, it is the state of the modern world, isn't it? But yeah, I mean,
it's like a perfect storm, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that food planning and batch cooking can be really great in those points, but you have to have that kind of mindset. And it would still mean, even if you were batch cooking, let's say you decided to batch cook for the week ahead, you're going to be batch cooking most of your Sunday.
Yeah.
And most people, after a full week of work,
don't want to be working on a Sunday, effectively.
No.
Yeah.
You know, they want to be relaxing. So yeah, the fast food, the emotional eating, all of that culture feeds into our life. Maybe our lifestyle's wrong. Maybe we all need to slow down a little bit and prioritize the foundation, which ultimately is connection with your family. Because I was lucky enough, generally, when we had food as a family, we would still sit at the table.
Yeah, we still eat at the table.
I think that's really good. I think it's really important to have that family time. But I think today, quite commonly, a lot of families don't eat together. A lot of children don't eat the same meals as their parents.
No, we don't always eat the same meals. I actually, because I'm my diet, I end up eating differently. But what's interesting also, I used to think that, and that was always our plan with the children, and we do still eat together as often as we can, which is most days. But then I also learned, because, you know, I love a system called human design, that we're all designed to eat differently anyway. And so what works for one doesn't necessarily work for another. So, you know, if I talk about our digestion types in our family, I'm what's called a consecutive digestion, which means I work better on a hunter-gatherer kind of diet. And that doesn't mean to have 3 meals a day. That means to kind of eat little and often. My eldest daughter is a daylight eater. So the moment she wakes up in the morning at the crack of dawn, she is ravenous. And she'll have 3 breakfasts every morning. And then, you know, she goes to bed as soon as the sun goes down. She's in bed by 6 most nights, 6:30. So she's a real daylight person. So actually, our dining room's in quite a dark section of our house. So if I was doing it properly by design, I'd be making her eat out in the garden every day. And the moment the sun comes out, she wants to eat out in the garden on a little table out there. My other daughter is a cold food digestion. So she naturally runs hot as a child. And so cold food brings her equilibrium. And then, so in theory, she should be eating different to us. So if we're all sitting around being forced to eat a hot meal, actually she goes and puts hers in the freezer, and she waits for it to cool down and then comes back and eats it.
Wow.
So just by their own type, they do it naturally, and then to learn that that is their type. And then my husband's called he's open or closed, I can't remember which one it is, but effectively they're kind of the same thing, which is where he eats on repeat. So when I met him, he just lived off cheese and ham sandwiches all the time, or cheese and ham toasties. And I was like, you need to get some variety on the diet. This is not healthy. But actually, what he's meant to eat in human design is that same thing on repeat, and the body will withdraw the nutrients that it needs from it. He shouldn't surprise his body with new things.
Oh, how interesting.
So it's been really interesting. So I used to always think, yes, we should all eat the same meal around the table, but I've wavered on that a little bit, and we still try and do the table thing, but we often eat in different stuff, or in different ways.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think, I think we're all, to say that one person one size fits all. I just think that we're all a little unique, and it's figuring out what's right. That's my view on that.
And what about sort of emotional eating for these different types of eater? Is there sort of different foods that they would pick?
So that's the thing, is that what's interesting is that that kind of emotional eating, or junk food eating, wouldn't fit necessarily in any type,
right,
as such. However, some of them are about what you eat, and some of them are about the way that you eat. So the theory behind it is you could eat roadkill if you wanted, and if you're eating it in the right way for your digestion type, you'll absorb the nutrients you need and excrete the rest. So there's some arguments to say that you can actually eat anything as long as you're eating it in the daylight, or if it's cold, for example. But then there are other arguments to say, well, actually, all of that is based on natural foods.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Not this ultra processed.
Not based on modern foods.
Yeah.
So there's arguments both ways on that. So I don't have an answer.
Yeah, and I suppose that is true, isn't it? That the ultra processed sort of packaged foods are made to be addictive. It's good marketing, isn't it?
And have our bodies, from an evolutionary perspective, caught up with ultra processed foods? Because actually, if ultra processed foods is the way that humanity is going to be forever and ever, ultimately we'll evolve to adapt to that, to be okay with that kind of food. But I think we're in this interim where ultra processed foods have happened so fast that we haven't had enough time to adjust as a species.
Yeah, I mean, a great example of that would be vegetable oils. They've only really been around in our diet for the last 50 years approximately, because you need literally an oil refinery to make these oils. You couldn't make them yourself in your kitchen. I mean, other than, say, olive oil, which wouldn't be considered a refined oil, but any of the other seed oils, we haven't had them in our diet, certainly only the last 50 years. And I think the rise in the omega-6 fatty acids in these oils being pro-inflammatory do cause a lot of digestive issues and inflammation in the diet for a lot of people.
So do you think that then perhaps generationally we're possibly the worst affected by these foods?
I think things are evolving, so quickly, aren't they?
So we're kind of the experiment with them as such, and in the long run maybe we'll adapt to them. Just a thought.
Maybe. I mean, I remember I was born in the late 70s, and I remember the first chocolate bar advert. It was for a finger of fudge. Do you remember it? A finger of fudge is just enough to give your kids a treat. So it was always a treat. It was never supposed to be a staple.
Yeah.
And those finger of fudges, I mean, they were they were only small.
Yeah.
I mean, they were literally all sugar.
But that's the thing now, is that we reward with stuff like this. And I find this because we have our children on a sugar-free diet. But if it's a birthday, if it's like an award or something like that, or just good behaviour, you reward with sweets. You reward with sweets, and it's become a bit tricky at school because I think they're the first children that must have gone through the school with a sugar-free diet. And the other day, I picked up my youngest daughter, and she came out eating a rich tea biscuit. They didn't even view that as sugar. Oh, I didn't realise that's not sugar-free. I'm like, well,
and this is from a school.
Yeah. So I find that really interesting. But we do reward with sugary treats, and I think that that's why, as adults, we then grow up and go, "Had a good day, so I'm going to treat myself," or "I've had a bad day, and I'm going to."
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we need to think of an alternative that isn't food-based or sugar-based.
Yeah.
Like a treat could be an activity rather than consumption of something.
Yeah, but even my kids are like, "Oh, if we've been good, can we have a biscuit or whatever? Can we have?" It's so heavily ingrained to reward with food.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, if you look at the history of sugar, I mean, it's a really, there's a really good book It's called The Case Against Sugar. It's by Gary Taubes, Taubs, The Case Against Sugar. Brilliant book. And it talks about the history of sugar right back to the sugar plantations in the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the fact that the slave trade has its, links with the sugar industry. The reason why the British took slaves from Africa was to transplant them into the Caribbean, was to grow sugarcane and refine sugarcane. So that, I kind of sort of knew that, but I didn't
connect the dots.
Didn't connect the dots at all on that. And then he talks about during the Elizabethan times, famously, Queen Elizabeth had really black teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And poor people used to blacken their teeth to show that they were rich enough to eat sugar. Mm-hmm. So it was always known that sugar rotted your teeth. Mm-hmm. And it became a status symbol to have blackened teeth because, of course, that shows that you were rich enough to... Now, if you think about your teeth, the enamel on your teeth, anybody who's watched any of the Lock Stock would know that your teeth do not rot. There's the pig farm. Have you watched the Lock Stock?
No,
okay, well,
no.
Totally honest tangent. But enamel is one of the hardest substances to rot. And if the sugar that's in your mouth for not very long can rot your enamel on your teeth, what is that doing to the inside of your body?
That's interesting.
So you think about that the next time you're...
But it's addictive.
Yes!
And it's culturally ingrained in us to reward ourselves or commiserate ourselves with it.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? It's slightly similar, but at school we used to get rewarded with McDonald's vouchers.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. But then that's there's a lot wrong with that, isn't there?
But that was a government scheme.
Yeah, but mind blown. Wow.
Yeah.
But it's the same as Coca-Cola sponsoring...
Oh, Coca-Cola used to... No, it wasn't Coca-Cola. It was McDonald's, sorry. Again, McDonald's used to come to our sports days and give us these sugary orange drinks.
Yeah. Because they actually know that by addicting a young brain, while we have what we call neuroplasticity, your brain is still growing. If you can addict a child young, you've got a customer for life. And this goes back to the sugary cereals. You know how all of the cereals that are promoted to children, they all have a character, don't they?
Do you remember when we used to get toys with them?
Well, yeah.
That's the best thing ever, rooting through that cereal box to get the toy.
Well, that was all by design.
Yeah.
And if I was to tell you that when it became apparent that big tobacco was losing its sort of fight that tobacco didn't cause, if I told you that big tobacco invested heavily in sugar, would that surprise you?
Very interesting, isn't it?
And they used all of their tobacco marketing know-how. Because remember in tobacco, everybody used to collect the little cards,
yeah.
And that was to get you addicted. Well, they used the same for, as you say, in the bottom of the cereal, there was a little toy. There was a character, so Frosty's Flakes, it's the tiger. The Cocoa Pops, you've got the monkey. Rice Krispies, you've got those
that crackle and pop
little elf things. Yeah. So they are targeted specifically for children. So if you're starting your child's day with a sugar high, what's going to happen? As we know, we're on that roller coaster all day. You speak to any teacher, they all hate teaching the lesson right after lunch.
Because they're full of sugar.
They're full of sugar, so they'll be hectic.
Yes, so the pudding, okay, here's another thing, slightly off topic, but on topic. School dinners are now given free to children in school, They even do this thing called Census Day, where it's effectively mandatory that all children have a school dinner, because the more that people that are measured on having a school dinner, I don't know, the more funding they get or something. I'm not really sure how it works. But they encourage you to have school dinners for Census Day. But then the school dinner, there's always a really sugary sweet pudding. And so my kids have to wear this special orange band so that they don't get given that. The teachers remember, all the din ladies, whoever, remember not to give them those sugary desserts. And they just get given fruit instead, because it's just the norm. And also, I remember my friend's daughter, she had a similar thing at the school, and she was like, well, the teacher said, well, we give them a choice. They can have fruit or they can have cake. And she's like, don't give them the choice, because of course they're going to pick the cake. They're children.
Of course they
don't
will.
Take the choice away. Just give them the fruit.
And I mean, you shouldn't have pudding after lunch.
Oh yeah, they do every day. But it's normally a sugary cake. Do you remember school custard?
Yeah. And Swiss roll with custard.
We used to have jam roly-poly with custard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is, I would say it's by design to addict the young people early, and then you'll have a customer for life. Because we've known that sugar is addictive, you know, for hundreds and hundreds of years. We've known the detrimental effects of sugar for hundreds and hundreds of years. When the modern dietary guidelines came out and fat was demonized, it was kind of like a battle between two eminent, one was a physiologist who won. He was called Dr. I've forgotten his name. It'll come to me. But the other one, who was basically right, was called Dr. Yudkin. And he wrote a book. You can still get it now. It's a very thin book. It's called Pure, White and Deadly.
I have that. I've never read it. I still got it.
It's a brilliant book. It's very of its time. It's very 1950s language. But he basically did experiments with mice, feeding them various different diets, and showed that without doubt, the mice that were given a sugar-based diet died earlier, had more comorbidities than a diet that was more sort of fat-based. But he was ridiculed, and he kind of lost the debate on the science, and the dietary guidelines were introduced in 1980, and the advice was to eat low fat. And so when you eat low fat diet, there tends to be a lot of carbohydrates or sugars added to the food. And of course, big food love that, because sugar acts as a preservative. It can allow your product to sit on the shelf for longer and it won't go off.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, there we are, putting the world to rights.
Ansel Keys, there you go. That was the guy. Dr. Ansel Keys. He was the guy that was responsible for the modern dietary guidelines. And we know that it was tenuous results, to say the least.
So let's just round that off. Emotional eating. Blame the sugar industry.
I think it's all about, yes, it's addictive. Think to yourself, next time you're eating in the evening, am I genuinely hungry? And feeling peckish is different. Like, if you were hungry, then you would eat a plate of broccoli. If you don't fancy eating a plate of broccoli, I would argue you're not actually hungry. So just ask yourself, am I hungry? If you are hungry, eat something, but try and eat something sort of whole food and not out of a packet.
As I say, what can we do to fulfill that need? Because it's such an overwhelming desire to sit and stuff my face in front of Netflix every night. What do I do to fulfill that need? So on the basis that, you know, one is anger and one is lack of love, as in, you know, if we believe that, you know, could you just, you know, go give someone a cuddle to get your fix, or could you, you know, go punch a pillow to get your fix?
I think that's
Is
absolutely.
it worth a try?
I think it is, and I think in the modern world we have so much lack of connection that we're trying to get our connection through a screen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which isn't the same, is it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same as having a community. So doing, because let's say when you're teaching yoga, when you're doing your yoga or you're doing your events,
Mm-hmm.
you're not thinking about food.
No, because I'm occupied.
Yeah. So that's key.
Mm-hmm.
It's social connection, it's occupied, but also if it is emotional, do we want to soothe ourselves because we've had a bad day, or are we trying to shield ourselves from something?
Is it a distraction?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It can soothe, it can shield. So really, I guess what it would be about is sitting with whatever emotion.
And asking why.
Yeah.
Mm.
Sort of working through it rather than suppressing it. Because it could easily be alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
It could be any number of self-medicating procedures, couldn't it? It could be gambling.
Mm-hmm.
Food is very socially acceptable. Unless you're obese. You know, imagine that you're a food addict and you are obese. And you know that we're not really supposed to use that. They're going to be changing that word.
Oh, really?
Yes, because it's seen as not politically correct.
Okay.
But if you're overweight and you binge eat, people look down on you for that. But some people have more of an addictive pull to food than others. So some people cannot stop.
You know what's also, we're massively going off on a tangent. I didn't know whether to bring this up or not, but I watched something a while back, and it was a study based on overweight people to say that actually it's a reaction to modern processed foods, whether that reaction is an addiction or just the body reacting because it's not something that's naturally for us. And so actually often this study suggested that people that are overweight are not necessarily overeating. There's an underlying problem, which is why some people say it's genetic, that, you know, their body is responding or reacting to all of this modern processed foods and, you know, storing it or holding on to it. Whereas the likes of you and I might eliminate it. That doesn't always happen to everybody. So it's not always an overeating thing. Sometimes it could be deemed as just a response to modern food.
I think maybe, yeah. And I think sometimes people that are very overweight often do have a lot of trauma in their past, and they'll use food to aid that. You know, and unless you're dealing with the trauma, you're using a Band-Aid, aren't you, to sort of cover up. And then you need more, you feel bad, so you eat more, and it's that,
cycle, isn't it? Interesting. I mean, we probably don't know the answers, or we'll never know the answers. But I think that recognition is the start of anything, isn't it? It's just recognizing, why am I having this craving or addiction right now? And then exploring that why.
Yeah, and starting with, am I hungry? And if you're not, then it's a snack, and a snack is always an emotional crutch. I would say.
I'm starving now. We've had this conversation. I'm just looking out the window at all of these coffee shops and things down this high street.
That all sell cake.
That all sell ultra processed delicious foods, and I'm thinking, what am I going to have?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that caffeine and sugar really go together. I mean, they're probably the most widely acceptable drugs of choice. Caffeine used to be alcohol, but now it's definitely a coffee culture, isn't it? But yeah, coffee and sugar, caffeine and sugar.
Delicious.
Yeah, and I mean, we haven't talked about like energy drinks, but
another time.
Yeah, because I mean that's a real problem for young people, that they're getting addicted to these really ultra processed energy drinks, which are full of sugar but also caffeine, so they're getting that double whammy.
Double combo.
I dread to think, that I think our generation is the first generation that our life expectancy is less than our parents.
Oh, really?
And I can't see that it's going to get any better.
Unless we evolve as humans to accept this kind of food. But I don't know how quickly that'll happen.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't happen, because, the planetary, we will need to go again on the farming of these big monocultures, because it's very detrimental. All the chemicals, the pesticides, the herbicides, the fungicides that are sprayed on these foods.
It's a much bigger picture than us just gorging on the sofa in the evening.
Yeah.
Much bigger.
Yes.
All right. Well, on that note, we will...
We need to leave on a happy note.
Yeah. Just do a song and dance. All right. Nice to see you all. Let us know what you think. Let us know your experiences, and we will catch up again soon.
And let us know if you are actually hungry, or if it's a emotional eating, or have you ever thought, is this emotional eating, or is it mindless eating?
Yeah, I'm good at that.
Yeah, because I think if you're eating in front of the TV, it can definitely be a mindless eating, and you're more likely to eat more. So yeah, let us know your thoughts.
Right, well, have a lovely week, everyone. And we'll see you next time with whatever we decide to talk about next.
Yeah, I'm sure we've got lots of options.
Let us know if you've got any thoughts.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.